What is up, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome back into another episode of the Kingdom Crew podcast. I am your host, Josh Fann, joined today by my good friend, our co-host, Michael D'Arcy of KC Sports Report. And we are here to talk all things Kansas City Chiefs here on Kingdom Crew. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. But if you're watching here on YouTube, before anything else, why don't you guys make sure you go ahead, hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe so more people can find this. But Michael, man, first of all, before anything, how are you doing today, man? I mean, we have not recorded an episode in a while. I know it feels like I start off every video with saying, man, it's been a while, but trying to get back into it. Kansas City Chiefs are 7-0 right now. I mean, it's a really good time to be a Chiefs fan. And how are you feeling? How are the vibes?
Chiefs traded for DeAndre Hopkins. That's new. Chiefs traded for Joshua Uche. Another new trade. They might go trade for Marshon Lattimore. So it's just been a crazy time covering this Chiefs team. They're literally all in. They might be the most all in I've seen them in quite some time to go out and make this three-peat happen. And Josh, I mean, there's a possibility we get Marshon Lattimore from the Saints or maybe another cornerback out there. Maybe they trade for a wide receiver. There's a bunch of teams out there that are 2-7. Maybe the Chiefs go out and make a big-time trade. So it's an exciting time to be a Chiefs fan for sure.
Yeah, that's a good way to start it. So we never did talk about the DeAndre Hopkins acquisition or the job. But what was your each? DeAndre Hopkins obviously was a huge move. The Chiefs needed a receiver. We knew that. You talked about all the teams that are losing a lot of games and how their rosters are easily poachable for talent. The Chiefs certainly did that with the Tennessee Titans, who aren't going anywhere this year. DeAndre Hopkins is on the other side. Comes on over to a contender, and it feels like the Brett Veach special where a guy that they were previously interested in or they tried to get goes somewhere. They're not willing to pay that money or give up the draft assets necessary, but they're able to get them later on for cheaper, not pay that contract that they ended up signing with the other team, in this case, the Titans. And it just works out. You still end up with that player. Might be a couple years later, but you still end up with the player you wanted ultimately. And that's why the relationships matter that you build in free agency too. And then, of course, the Joshua Uche trade. I honestly feel like that's the steal, the big steal here that not a lot of people are talking about. But I don't want to get too deep into it before getting your kind of reaction on both of them. I mean, what were your thoughts on each move?
Listen, both of these guys were a Brett Veach special, a conditional 4th-round draft pick, a 6th-round draft pick 2 years from now. It just goes to show you that Brett Veach remembers what happens in free agency and in college. The Chiefs wanted DeAndre Hopkins last year in free agency. He ended up signing somewhere else, and they wanted Joshua Uche when he was at Michigan, ended up getting drafted somewhere else, but he always comes back around. The Chiefs circle back on players that they like, and both of these guys have a very low risk, but have a potential to be a very high reward for this Chiefs team. A conditional 4th-round pick, the Chiefs have to make the Super Bowl, and he has to play in at least half of the snaps. I think both of those things are probably very good bets. And then Uche for a 6th-round draft pick 2 years from now, he's got one of the best pass rush win rates in the NFL. Like, you're going to sign up for that 10 times out of 10. And for a team that is trying to three-peat, those are two blockbuster moves. And Josh, they might go get someone else.
Yeah, they could get someone else. We're going to talk about, some of those potential moves here in a second. Real quick on D-Hop, I feel like everyone kind of knows the gist of that one, why it's a good move. I mean, the Titans are on the hook for most of his remaining contract. The Kansas City Chiefs get him for a very late round pick, a day 3 pick, I should say. I guess it's an earlier day 3 pick, but still a day 3 pick for a wide receiver who had 1,000 yards last year with not very good quarterback play. The Kansas City Chiefs were in desperate need of a wide receiver. And I think the best part about acquiring a guy like DeAndre Hopkins is that you can just tell off the bat, even in that first Raiders game, Michael, where he played, he had a couple catches that, weren't huge. I mean, they didn't go for massive gains, but they were both for either a first down or when the Chiefs were trying to get in field goal range late at the end of the first half. And you can just kind of tell already that D-Hop gets it. He understands how to play with a veteran quarterback like Patrick Mahomes. And you need that comfortable option in the offense because that's something you can't get with a rookie like Xavier Worthy, who we think has immense talent, but he just doesn't get it all the way yet. He's not quite there as he plays more snaps. So I'm super excited for him. Now for Joshua Uche, in this case, I think he could be a potential steal for this team. You trade a 6th-round pick to get him. He has one of the highest pass rush win rates in the league. His sack production was down over the past couple years, but he had 11.5 for the Kansas City Chiefs to acquire a speed rusher with bend on the edge to play next to Chris Jones. Now you have a solid defensive line with Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, Mike Dana, Omenihu when he comes back, but you still didn't have that super bendy guy that could win with speed, that could get to the quarterback in 2 seconds. That's Joshua Uche. And I think when you have a guy like Chris Jones drawing that much attention, a guy like George Karlaftis, who definitely draws a fair amount of attention himself, you need that speed rusher that can come in and take advantage of that when he gets those one-on-ones. Joshua Uche is that guy. I think he's going to come in here and he's going to rack up sacks. I don't think that's unreasonable to say. You look at his pass rush win rate, it's more likely to turn into actual sack production when he's playing on a defensive line this good.
Oh yeah. And listen, you have to, grade the trade for what it is. It was a guy that didn't fit in New England anymore, and they traded a day 3 pick 2 years from now to get Uche. So you have to be, over the moon with this trade if you're Brett Veach. And I don't know what the future of Joshua Uche in Kansas City is going to look like. They might not keep him after this year. I don't know how the contract, I guess he is a free agent after this year, so the Chiefs will have to determine if he's worth a contract extension. But for a rental, you got a guy that can get to the quarterback at a alarming rate. He does have some issues stopping the run. This Chiefs defense doesn't need any help stopping the run.
Yeah,
so I think
they're good there.
They're good in that category. And for what it is, he is one of the best guys in the NFL at getting to the quarterback, and that's what we need.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to poke at least one weakness on this defense or poke a hole in this defense, I think it was probably the edge rush. That's probably where they were weakest. With the Jalen Watson injury at cornerback, maybe you could say that, but we'll talk about cornerback later on because we don't think the Kansas City Chiefs are quite done yet. But the one hole that you could poke in this defense is the edge rush isn't quite there. Mike Dana, although everyone loves him, had a 4% pass rush win rate this year. That's not going to get it done. George Karlaftis, although he's heated up over the past couple weeks, had a really weak pass rush win rate to start this season. And so to bring in a guy like Joshua Uche, who just is so much better than those guys in that department, I think this defense got even scarier.
Yeah, and I do think the cornerback room is a bit thin right now. We're going to talk about some options that could be potential fits for this Chiefs team. But I think to address the needs at the time, Uche, fantastic trade, and D-Hop, great trade.
Well, you mentioned how the Kansas City Chiefs are all in, and these moves indicate that this is an aggressive Brett Veach that we have not quite seen since he's been the GM here. He's always been aggressive in a way. I'm not saying that he hasn't during the offseason for sure. But as far as the trade deadline, they've made some moves here and there. But I think they really are seizing the opportunity here, and it's something that I wasn't quite sure if Brett Veach was going to do or if he had in him because, Michael, I think you can agree with me here. This team and this organization, Brett Veach, they love their in-house candidates, and it always kind of feels like they'll go with those guys over the outside option. And even when they go to an outside option, it's a guy that had already played for them before. Last year, they got McCall Hardman at the trade deadline. It's like, that's your move at wide receiver. Okay. What's Veach going to do this time? He got DeAndre Hopkins, and I honestly was kind of shocked that he even made a move for a pass rusher because it was an area that I wanted to see them add to, but I wasn't sure if the Chiefs thought they needed to add to there. And I'm really glad that they did because it's just going to bolster this pass rush so much more. And if they can pull off a trade for a cornerback, my word about Brett Veach ever again, because that would really tell you how they feel about this season, how all in they are.
Well, here's the thing, Josh. I think that while it's nice to see that Brett Veach is ultra aggressive, I think he was ultra aggressive for one reason and one reason only. The value was there. There are so many bad football teams in the NFL this year, the 2-7s of the world. There was going to be a lot of value at the trade deadline for teams that are just trying to get some pick in return for their DeAndre Hopkins or Joshua Uche. And the value on both of these picks are why the Chiefs pulled the trigger. If Hopkins was going for a 3rd-round draft pick, they would have laughed at the Tennessee Titans and hung up the phone. If Joshua Uche was going to go for anything more than a day 3 pick 2 years from now, he probably wouldn't be a Chief. And so I think that the value was so good for this front office. It's a no-brainer to make these trades. And it's probably why the Chiefs are so aggressive, because they see all of these 2-7 football teams and think to themselves, yeah, we can pick that guy up for a day 3 pick. It's nothing against us. Like, we can just go get that kind of talent and they'll trade it to us. And so the value has really worked out in the Chiefs' favor, because we've seen wide receivers and defensive ends get traded for crazy things in years past, but it hasn't been like that this year.
No, that's a very good point. And I don't think the Chiefs are the only team benefiting from this either. We also saw the Baltimore Ravens trade for Carolina Panthers wide receiver Deontay Johnson. And that was one that a lot of Chiefs fans maybe wanted to see Kansas City get after, is Deontay Johnson, because he's still very young and he could be a potential long-term option at the position. Now, we could totally end up seeing DeAndre Hopkins stay here for multiple years, and that would be perfectly fine with me. But the Ravens gave up an even lower pick than the Kansas City Chiefs did for a younger receiver in Deontay Johnson, which was a little bit surprising to me. Not that I would necessarily rather have Deontay Johnson over D-Hop, but Michael, was there any sort of regret from you there, or resentment towards the Ravens for getting a better deal as far as compensation given up to get Deontay Johnson?
So I made a live stream right after the Panthers traded Deontay Johnson to the Ravens, and I was pissed. I was like, why did Brett Veach not make this trade? It's a 5th-round draft pick. It doesn't make any sense to pass up on a player that could change your offense this year. Apparently, the Carolina Panthers had no intention of trading with the Chiefs, which I find ridiculous, because they're a horrible team in a different conference than the Chiefs, but they didn't want to trade with the Chiefs. And so I can't fault Brett Veach for not pulling off a trade with a team that didn't even want to do business with him. So it sucks that we didn't get Deontay Johnson, especially for a 5th-round draft pick. I mean, you'll take that any day of the week. And it was a pick swap. The Baltimore Ravens got a pick back for Deontay Johnson, which is ridiculous. And I don't understand who is calling the shots over there in Carolina, because a horrific trade. Deontay Johnson's been a fantastic player this year, and to get a 5th-round draft pick for him, that's highway robbery. But I think that the Ravens kind of made that move in reaction to what the Chiefs did. If the Chiefs did not trade for DeAndre Hopkins, there wouldn't have been a sense of urgency to go out and trade for Deontay Johnson.
Well, we do know that old friend Brant Tillis is in the Carolina Panthers front office, who they brought over from Kansas City over the offseason. So you would think that the relationship in the Carolina Panthers organization there would have helped the deal, unfold, but apparently not. And I don't understand why the Panthers wouldn't trade for the Chiefs, because I did see that on Twitter as well. Someone floating around the idea that the Panthers wouldn't trade for the Chiefs. Why are the Titans, who are in the AFC, more likely to trade with us than the Carolina Panthers? Makes zero sense to me.
I mean, there's a reason why the Carolina Panthers are going to pick top 5. They're not a very well-run organization.
You may be right about that, Michael. I think you're on to something there. They are a train wreck right now. But what will really upset me is that the Chiefs end up trading for someone else that is also from Carolina. Then it will really make no sense to me. Then you can't say that they weren't willing to deal with us. But some people have expressed concern maybe over Deontay Johnson's character or attitude, because this is his 2nd time being traded in less than 1 year. And he's gone for really low compensation both times. Do you buy into that at all? Or do you think that this is just kind of how it was because the Panthers were terrible this year and they didn't have any long-term plans with Deontay Johnson?
I didn't hear any character concerns in Carolina. I obviously remember the whole fiasco in Pittsburgh where he kind of gave up on a play and didn't really hustle. And so that is a bad look. But the Carolina Panthers they suck. So I think that was a move for them. Yeah, we'll take a 5th-round draft pick to get this guy off our books. He's not coming back here next year. Let's go get a pick for him. So it makes sense for Carolina. You probably could have gotten more for him if you went to someone else, but that the wide receiver market hasn't been very good this year for teams trying to get draft capital back. It's been very low. Day 3 draft picks. Cooper went for a 5th, I think, or maybe it was a 4th, but DeAndre Hopkins
was a 5th. Yeah.
5th, Hopkins for a 4th, Johnson for a 5th. And that's why I think, listen, if you could go get Darius Slayton from the Giants, he might get to here for a 6th or a 7th round draft pick.
No, for sure. And we'll talk about that because before we get to corner, because I know it's the one that we're all eager to talk about. Before we get to cornerback, though, I think it's worth talking about adding a potential pass catcher on top of DeAndre Hopkins before the deadline because, Michael, if you're up to date on all the Chiefs news, the Kansas City Chiefs lost rookie tight end Jared Wiley yesterday due to a torn ACL that occurred in practice. Just brutal, and it sucks because Jared Wiley was a very exciting prospect that the Kansas City Chiefs picked up in the 4th round of the draft. I think there's a very real chance he ends up the tight end of the future. He was one of the best offensive players in the country last year in college at TCU. All that being said, though, you're down another tight end. You've lost now two tight ends to a torn ACL versus Jared Wiley to a torn ACL from practice over the week. And if you noticed with this Chiefs offense, because of the wide receiver injuries they've had, Juju Smith, really we're starting to rely on the tight ends in this offense a little bit more, doing a lot of 13, 14 personnel to make up for the loss of the wide receiver injuries, Michael. Now you're having tight end injuries. So it almost makes me wonder if the Kansas City Chiefs maybe try to get a little more aggressive and add one more wide receiver to this group now that your tight ends are starting to take a hit.
Injuries have just been such an issue all across the board for this Chiefs team. And so an offensive weapon, whether it's a tight end or a wide receiver, I think you almost need to go out and trade for someone just for insurance, just because everybody else is getting hurt and it's across the NFL this year. But I don't want there to be, a lack of depth on this team when you're trying to win a Super Bowl. So I think a trade for somebody, give up a day 3 pick, a 6th or a 7th rounder, and you'll be fine. You'll get someone that's more than capable of producing in this offense.
Well, one of my main concerns when we traded for D-Hop as well is he's also 32 years old and he was struggling with an MCL injury this year. There's no guarantee that DeAndre Hopkins makes it through the rest of the regular season. So again, insurance, like you said, Michael, and also like Travis Kelce with the tight end injuries that have occurred. Now he's going to be expected to play an increased workload. And we were kind of trying to avoid that this year. Kelce and D-Hop are very integral parts of this offense, but they're also on the older side. You want to keep them fresh for the postseason. So you almost have to consider getting someone like Darius Slayton, who's nobody special, but he's a viable option that can play in this offense. He can catch passes. He can produce just at least until we get to the postseason. Then you figure out, who's going to be healthy and who's not.
Yeah, and listen, Brett Veach has been ultra aggressive so far in this postseason. So far at this trade deadline. Why stop now?
Yeah,
why stop when you're, a day 3 pick away from going to get somebody that can help you win a Super Bowl in 4 months? So just go do it. Go get a wide receiver, go get a cornerback, and just don't leave anything up to chance. You've got an opportunity to ensure that your team is going to be good enough come January time, and why even risk it?
Yeah, I'm with you there. Don't. But I mean, who's to say that the injury bug doesn't stop biting? And you remember what happened last year with this team, and that wasn't because of injuries. That was just because they weren't very good. But you want to avoid that scenario again because I just don't think it's sustainable. Yes, the Chiefs are 7-0 this year, and they look dominant in a way, mostly because of their defense. But that's what we did last year, and these games have been close, Michael, for the most part. I mean, they haven't blown anyone out. So, a couple wide receiver drops, these games could flip the other way. I don't want to poke holes in the Chiefs being undefeated because I think they're deserved 7-0, a deserved undefeated record. But I just think you have a chance to do something that no team in NFL history has done. It's extremely hard to win in the NFL. It's hard to three-peat, and you could make things just a little bit easier by giving up one more day 3 pick, bringing someone in that can help.
Yeah, absolutely. Just don't leave anything up to chance. Just go do it.
For sure. Now let's talk about cornerback because that is the hot topic right now in Chiefs Kingdom. The Kansas City Chiefs lost Jalen Watson, their starting cornerback, alongside Trent McDuffie, who's having an awesome year a couple weeks ago after he broke his ankle against the San Francisco 49ers. And we saw Najee Johnson, Joshua Williams, Christian Roland Wallace all get their chance to show what they can do against the Las Vegas Raiders. And it wasn't great. Joshua Williams gave up several big plays. Nazeeh Johnson almost got put on the ground by Gardner Minshew, who was downfield blocking. By the way, Gardner Minshew, Michael, was benched today during the Raiders game for them, and he actually looked really good last week against us throwing at our corners, which has me really concerned about our depth at that position. Adam Schefter of ESPN has already stated that the Kansas City Chiefs have checked in on New Orleans Saints cornerback Marshon Lattimore in particular as a potential trade target. I think most of us would like the Chiefs to acquire a cornerback via trade. Marshon Lattimore would be probably the best one you could get. But the other thing, Michael, is he's also realistic because the Saints are one of those teams you mentioned that are 2-7. They look awful. They're not going anywhere this year. Marshon Lattimore is on the older side for a cornerback. He's 28. His contract is actually pretty affordable. Now, most people remember that he signed that huge $90 million contract a few years ago, but his base salary this year was only $1.2 million. Now that the season's halfway over, the Chiefs would only be on the hook for $600,000 for the rest of the year for his base salary. And then his contract can be voided, I believe, after this year, or there's a potential out. And also, if the Kansas City Chiefs wanted to, they could offer a rich enough draft pick to where the Saints just take care of most of that contract. And I don't know, Michael. I think this would be the dream scenario because Marshon Lattimore would be absolutely nasty in this defense. And not only that, but if you think about that outside shot that Jalen Watson has to return at the end of the year for the stretch run of the postseason, if he can get healthy, because it has been thrown out there that there's a chance he could come back. If you had Jalen Watson healthy and Marshon Lattimore and Trent McDuffie and run 3 cornerbacks out there, imagine what Spags could do with that. I mean, that would be scary for the rest of the NFL.
My only concern about him is his injuries. He's also someone that he's an older cornerback. He's got some injury problems. That's not why he's been sitting out recently. I understand that it's not an expensive trade to make this year. I wonder if the Chiefs would do it because would they trade a rich draft pick to get Marshon Lattimore when they might be thinking of the future, or if he could play in the future. I don't know if this is a rental or a guy that they could, foreseeably play on the other side of Trent McDuffie. I'm not sure. I don't know what Brett Veach is thinking, but as a rental, though, I don't hate it at all. I think, listen, $600K, 4th, 5th round draft pick, and we roll. Don't give up a third. Don't give up a second, but you could probably get him for maybe a third. The only reason I say a third is because a cornerback, that position, good corners are harder to find than good wide receivers. And so I don't know if he would go for more or less than a wide receiver. I think he might be more expensive, also given that contract is on the books.
Yeah, if you were offering a third, it would have to be because the Saints are taking care of most of the contract.
Yeah. And hey, if that's the situation, I mean, I don't hate it. We because you got an extra 3rd round draft pick next year from L'Jarius Sneed. So you're basically just replacing Marshon Lattimore for L'Jarius Sneed.
Yeah, I also saw a tweet recently that went over Brett Veach 3rd round picks over recent years. And the best player he's taken out of several drafts in the 3rd round was Leo Chenal. And it quite frankly wasn't close. You had Colin Saunders in there. You had a couple others that I can't remember. And it's like, okay, well, what are we really trying to say?
Niang.
Yeah, would you rather have a backup left tackle or one of the best shutdown corners in the NFL?
Yeah. A 4-time Pro Bowler. Yeah.
2-time All-Pro as well.
Yeah. So. Go make it happen. If it's possible. I did see something on Twitter, and I don't know how accurate it is, that maybe the Chiefs told Schefter to release this information so another team bites. I'm not sure if there's any legitimacy to that. It was just someone's train of thought, but maybe the Chiefs are playing some mind games to get another team to pony up with their cornerback, because the Chiefs don't normally make the big time trades for a flashy name. I mean, they did that with DeAndre Hopkins, but I think that they're much more of a bargain cornerback, bargain player kind of team, and it's worked out for them. But maybe they're trying to bait some other team into giving up their cornerback.
Well, and I think if we're going to try to find someone that fits the Brett Veach theme here, it's going to be someone younger than Marshon Lattimore. The one name that I've seen thrown around is Cleveland Browns cornerback Greg Newsome. Yeah. He's only 24. The Browns are terrible. That one would make a lot of sense, though he'd probably be a little bit more expensive than Marshon Lattimore. And I'm not sure if the Chiefs are trying to spend a significant draft asset for a corner, because it's not like they expect this person to replace Jalen Watson long term. Like, Jalen Watson will be back at some point. I think the Chiefs still really like him. So you could certainly see Brett Veach going that route potentially, but maybe what he does is goes after someone that is cheap to acquire, but it also is strictly a rental and there's no strings attached. I'm thinking like a Tre'Davious White with the Los Angeles Rams, who they recently said they were going to look to trade him. Now, he hasn't looked great this year for the Los Angeles Rams. He obviously has struggled with injuries over the past few years, but we've seen him play at an elite level in Buffalo not that long ago. And really, Steve Spagnuolo and defensive backs coach Dave Merritt have been really good about just getting guys with that little bit of talent and making them into productive players. So maybe you see this team give up like a 7th round pick for Tre'Davious White. And I think, that's probably still an upgrade over a Najee Johnson.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think having Trent McDuffie on the other side will take a lot of pressure off of that number 2 cornerback to not have to do everything by himself. But you kind of saw in that Raiders game, Gardner Minshew picked on Najee Johnson, and Joshua Williams specifically. He just got abused all game long.
There was a reason that he was benched prior to that game. I mean, he was not even seeing the field before Jalen Watson got hurt.
Yeah, he's struggled so far this year. So if you could go out and trade for another cornerback, I think that's the biggest need right now. And honestly, I want to see what they do against the Buccaneers. But considering that Gardner Minshew had that type of game against our number 2 cornerback, I think that's a legitimate hole going forward. And hopefully they could find some way to maneuver around that. But once you get to the playoffs, there's going to be teams that try to pinpoint that weakness, because it might be the Chiefs' only weakness on defense. They can do everything else. I mean, I guess you could say maybe they can't cover the tight end, but they've
been
just
better at that as of recently. And
yeah,
I mean, and people will point out the performance against Brock Bowers, but I think, Brock Bowers has a chance to be a generational tight end prospect. So that's a little bit different. The Buccaneers game will be interesting because I don't know if you'll really learn anything about your corners in that game unless they're really bad. Because if they're really bad against that receiving room, because there will be no Mike Evans in that game and there will be no Chris Godwin in that game. Both of them are out with injury. If you struggle against that offense, and Baker Mayfield has had a good year, he's a decent quarterback, but if you struggle against that offense, it's going to tell me everything I need to know about these corners. You need to go out and make a move. But I don't think you can learn anything even if they have a good game, because they're decimated.
I think regardless, you have to make a move. It's just I guess the severity of the move. Maybe you could get away with a White for a 7th round pick, but maybe if it doesn't go well, you do pull the trigger on getting Lattimore for a more expensive draft pick.
Yeah, I'm with you there. So that's our thoughts on the cornerbacks, Michael, unless you had anything else to add. The last topic I wanted to hit in this podcast is the potential for the Kansas City Chiefs to go undefeated. Because really, if you look at their schedule, Michael, they have one tough game left. And that's November 17th against the Buffalo Bills. That'll be a tough game, but you play the Panthers, the Raiders. Basically, you get like the Cleveland Browns, the Carolina Panthers, and then you get the Chiefs division for the rest of the year. Oh, yeah, there's a game against the Texans in there. But even Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Texans got all this hype over the offseason, and people were treating CJ Stroud like he was the next challenger to Mahomes. And the Texans, had their 2018 Chiefs offseason where they got their Frank Clark and Daniil Hunter, and they paired him up with Will Anderson on the defensive line. They traded for Stephon Diggs at wide receiver. Like, it was supposed to be the Texans here. They were going to challenge the Chiefs. They look average at best, and they've had some injuries. Yeah, they maybe have some holes that they didn't quite plug that they should have on the offensive line, but they just do not look like challengers at all. So I don't consider that a hard game. But if you look at the Chiefs schedule, Michael, besides the Bills game, I mean, what are the odds they go undefeated?
I do think, circling back to the Texans really quickly, I think the injury bug has maybe hit them a little bit harder. And just because CJ Stroud's so young, he hasn't he doesn't have that ability to carry a team quite yet. And I do think the injuries like to Tank Dell and Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs, like it's a problem in Texas. But I do think that the Buffalo game's probably the only game on your schedule you think realistically you could lose going into it. But listen, I think the Chiefs might lose a game. Maybe it's to the Raiders, maybe it's to the Broncos, that you're just like, how the hell did they lose that game? But I don't really want this team to go undefeated. And that might be a hot take. That might be, get me flamed in the comment section. I think it would be beneficial for this Chiefs team to lose a game or two, have their minds right going into this postseason. Because if they're rolling into the playoffs 17-0, I'm going to be terrified because it's just adding pressure on this three-peat that you don't need. You do not need this added pressure of trying to now not only three-peat, but trying to go perfect through that three-peat. I think it would be beneficial for them to lose a game. But, I mean, Josh, it's going to happen to a team that we don't expect if it happens at all.
I think I actually agree with you. And we actually talked about this on your channel, I believe, last week when we were discussing Mike Renner's comments about this team, not being great, even though they were 7-0. And I said I would almost kind of like to see them lose a game as well somewhere in there, just because you want to at least have one sort of gut punch moment of adversity that can prepare you for the playoffs so that you don't go into it thinking that you're invincible, because that's a mindset that can come back to bite you in the ass. Like the other times you think of with the Chiefs where everything came so easy for them, there was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Super Bowl season 2020 where they ran through everyone. They had some injuries occur, but they still ran through Buffalo in the AFC Championship, get to the Super Bowl, they get punched in the mouth. They don't know how to respond. And then 2021 wasn't necessarily easy for them. That was a tough year to start out, and they had that thriller AFC divisional round against the Buffalo Bills. But I think they were riding the highest of that so much. They came into that AFC Championship game feeling invincible, and it came back to bite them in the ass. That's a game that the Chiefs absolutely should have won. That's a game that we're going to look back at the end of Patrick Mahomes' career and say, man, this was a great career, but I'm always going to think about that 2021 AFC Championship game. We should have won that game. We should have went to the Super Bowl and probably would have won. But yeah, my point is, I agree with you. I think it would be beneficial to see them lose to someone. I don't really care the opponent. Because, you really have a good enough cushion that you can lose a game or two and still be the number one seed in the AFC. And they may very well not go undefeated because by the time they get to week 17, they don't need to play.
Yeah, and listen, this team's 16-0 going into Denver, and they've got the 1 seed locked up. I don't think they play their guys. I don't. I think they sit them.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question actually for you is do you think they would chase history to try to go 17-0 if they were that close, or do you still think it would just be like, nah, we're going to sit the starters?
I don't know, because whose call is that? Is that an Andy Reid call? Is it a Patrick Mahomes call? Does Patrick Mahomes have the ability to override Andy Reid on that? Is that a Clark Hunt decision where, no, we're going to try to make history and go undefeated through the season? I don't know.
I think that's probably an Andy Reid decision, because I've always said Andy has the most pull in the organization, but I also don't think there would be anyone fighting back on Andy Reid either, if that's what he said, because last year when Travis Kelce had a chance to have another 1,000-yard season, that was a veteran, had those 2 catches for 20 yards against the Chargers to have 1,000 yards in the season. He said, nah, I'm not going to play. I'm going to get healthy for the playoffs. This isn't as important to me as a Super Bowl. And I feel like the whole team will probably carry that same mentality.
Yeah, and that's what's important. I don't care if this team goes 17-0 and loses in the divisional round. There's nothing cool about that season. It was a failure. That is a failure of a season to go that, be that dominant in the regular season and not get it done when it truly matters. So yeah, I think there is pressure for the Chiefs to, not go perfect, but still, be healthy for that three-peat. I think, Josh, we're in such a great position where we get to the postseason, we have that bye week, we win 1 game, and you're back in the AFC Championship game. And then it's 3 games to win a Super Bowl, and the Chiefs have shown that they can do that.
Well, if you get that 1 seed, then it's 2 games to get to the Super Bowl, and I think that would be extremely beneficial to get that bye week right before the postseason, give those guys that are on the fence a chance to get healthy like a Hollywood Brown, and then yeah, I feel really good. You win 2 games and you're in.
Yeah. And I think that should be the mindset of this Chiefs team, not to go undefeated, because that would be historic if they could go 17-0 and then win a Super Bowl. That would be the greatest team of all time. Like, I don't think, especially coming off 2 Super Bowl wins, Josh, like we would talk about this season forever. But I don't think that that's really what matters here. Now, I will say they do get to that point where they are 16-0. I could see why they would play, the starters against the Broncos. Maybe not for an entire game, but throw them in for a half. Just let them, try to see what they could do. If they're up by 10, then put the other guys in or whatever. I don't know. But if you're going into week 17 at 16-0, you've already basically done the heavy lifting. Maybe you should just try to go undefeated,
Yeah. And look, I'd be much more excited to watch our backup play football, because our backup this time around is Carson Wentz. In that last game against the Chargers, and he was god awful. I'd like to see Carson Wentz.
I'd be interested in seeing what he could do.
For sure. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up there, though, Michael. You guys have it from us, our thoughts on what undefeated actually happens. You got our thoughts on the trades, the Jared Wiley injury. We covered it all. So we'll go ahead and sign off there. But before we do, Michael, where can the people find you?
You guys can find me on YouTube at KC Sports Report. We're like 3 subscribers away from 7,400. So Josh's channel can get me over to that hump. But yeah, YouTube is the one-stop shop for everything that I'm doing. You can also follow me on Twitter at the Michael D'Arcy. But YouTube at KC Sports Report is where everything goes down.
And that'll all be in the description, as always, guys. As far as my work, you can check me out on showmefootball.com, arrowheadaddict.com for all the writing stuff. Check me out here on YouTube. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell. We'll see you all next one. Go Chiefs.
What's up, Chiefs Kingdom? Noah Gray here, tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Josh's channel, and check out showmefootball.com for more.